Okay, so today we'll pretty much get started with the framework. Think of today as like first day in your job, right? We're gonna go, yeah, we're recording. We're going to go through the framework. If you have any questions, you ask. So a lot of the stuff is baked in already. So last couple of weeks that we've been working on is just to kind of get you, get started. But I wouldn't let you build the framework. So the whole idea is everywhere you go, it's very rare situation where you have to build a tool. Like I said, it's going to be someone senior who's kind of working on it or things like that. So mostly you just go in, get plugged in, and start automating the test cases, right? Now, whenever you go, it's not going to be exactly what I'm doing here, but it's going to be similar concept, right? It's like, think of when you use different apps, right? They're all not the same, but the core fundamental of how they build it, they're all same, right? Same thing with this framework. It's something that is from my design, right? From my experience, so to speak, right? So it's like I say, it's not going to be exactly the same, but if you can work on something like this, it's pretty simple to understand and whatnot. But once you work on it, you get used to it, right? So you may go into a platform where then I be using Java, but it doesn't matter, right? It could be using JavaScript, Python, whatnot, but you still be able to understand what's happening. Now, granted, you have to learn those language, right? Second thing is, even if you go into a Java environment, right? I'm sure it's not going to be exactly apple to apple, but you will understand, you will know what you need to look for. Where is the test layer? Where is the page object layer? Where is the base page layer, right? Um, so just keep all these things in mind when you're learning this, and expect it's not going to be exactly same everywhere you go. Now, there are only thing that we have kind of changed from what we've been learning is that we got rid of the tests. You know how we had the Java class for test, where we were writing out tests, creating page objects. So that's the layer we kind of got rid of, and we've added something called future, right? And then that future is triggered by something called step definition. But besides those two, and those are the two extensively we're going to go over today. We're going to do some test cases together and everything. And then before each one of you guys leave today, I want to make sure you can run this code base on your machine before you go home, right? So, we're not going to leave you hanging. But in the second part of what you really need to understand is the step definition layer. But the test layer the way we've been writing test cases, that concept is gone. Now, you may go into a place where they're still using that, right? That was kind of like, let's say, 7, 8 years, 9 years ago, if I were to build a framework, I would build it that way using TestNG, right? But you saw how you had the ed test annotation, but you may go into a platform where the framework is that old, right? And they're not going to change all of the test cases, right? I mean, there's a few, one of the project that, I don't know if I have it here. So think of like, there is this project, right? And we can move this over to Cucumber just because you wanted to, right? I mean, it's insane amount of test cases. It's crazy, right? So it's, hundreds of $1,000s being spent here, right? Maybe millions of dollars that we spend on this framework or amount of test cases. So just because you want to change it, because you're not comfortable with TestNG, no one's going to buy into it. But it doesn't matter. That's what I'm trying to prove it to you. You may go into an environment, right, and you see this code base that is massive, right? Millions of lines of code or tests, right? So what are you going to do? You can't just stop working, right? So you just kind of adopt to that culture, right? Or to that framework. That does not mean, you go into Cucumber and you can work, right? So when you go into a Cucumber platform, it's going to be somewhat similar, right? Now this framework has all these tools like Cucumber or TestNG, they have some core concept that we have to follow. So we're not going to be totally off from what you're learning here. So whoever built that framework, they also have to follow this, let's say, five, six different things for them to even framework work or get integrated. So that has to be same everywhere. So the core concept of fundamentally nothing is going to change. What I really want you to understand here, what I'm really trying to get from you guys by next week is that you can understand this framework and you stay within the boundary of this framework. You're following the rules of the framework, right? So that's what I want to kind of see. I don't want to see any foreign code. I don't want you to copy paste some code from online and then break the framework and it's not working. Then I won't fix it because that's not the goal here. The goal is, hey, here's the framework. It doesn't do everything perfect, right? But this is what we have and this is what you're going to work on. Same thing when you go into another company. They're gonna give you a framework. You're not gonna like everything that it does, right? But you have to kind of adopt. But like I said, look at there's other consequence. We can't just change it once we have thousands of test cases there. There's no way we can change it, right? Not at least overnight, right? So you might work in a framework that is 10, 12, 13 years old, right? If the application is that old, the framework's gonna be that old, right? But anyhow, so let's get started. Before we get started, do you guys have any questions or anything? So you're not rewriting anything. I'm just going to give you this and give you some tests to automate, and you're going to stay within the boundary and automate those test cases. So I don't want you to go home, create a new project, and do that, right? What we are going to do is I might give you a GitHub link where I will post this, and you can just kind of clone that and work on it locally on your machine, all right? Or I can just give you the zip file and you can, work on it both ways. But most importantly, I really want you to understand what's happening, right? Otherwise, you're gonna be a little lost. So we can go over 7 different things. I think that should cover most of the stuff that I want to cover, right? Walkthrough of pom.xml with new dependencies. So for us to implement this, we needed to add some new dependencies. What are dependencies? Isha? Come on, dude.
It's where you store like repository that contains like main class that you created and you store all of the things in.
Yeah, it will be more specific. Come on, dependencies.
For the same version that you want to use. What?
Dependencies. What kind of dependency we have so far?
Selenium and testing.
Yeah. What are those? So you can say external libraries. Come on now, right? No, they're not jar files, right? Jar files is usually downloaded and uploaded into the project. We're not using that. That's how we used to do in the 90s. Not me. They used to do in the 90s. So dependencies, it goes into cloud and gets those binary code for us so we can use them. But you don't have to go into that details, right? Selenium and TestNG is 2 dependencies we've added. Come on, we have to be top of our things. Someone can throw you off with these nonsense questions. But most importantly, you should know these things. You should know how to explain your technology, right? So let's go through what are some new dependencies that we added, because things got a little complex here. But you don't, like I said, you don't worry about these things. So what we've done is I've added something called properties, and it's because maven.compiler source 1.8. So the reason I added this because you may be using different Java version, right? And then I may be using different Java version. Well, this forces you to use 1.8. Otherwise, this project is not going to compile. So that's kind of one of those things that we are handling, right? Because what if you're using Java 11 and some syntax error and all that crap starts showing up? We don't want to deal with that, right? We want to focus on, okay, make sure everybody's in 1.8. And 1.8 was the biggest release they've made in the last 15 years. So that's why it's kind of the standard, right? There are Java 9, 10, it's just a tiny little syntax updates and this and that. So I'm not worried about it. So if you're using 1.8, that's totally fine. you may even go into a place where they're using 1.6, right? Maybe a lot of the code base is from 1.6, so you may have to, adapt to how they're doing it. But fundamentally, nothing's changing. Maybe the way they write array there is a little bit different than the way you're writing array in 1.8 or compared to 1.10. So, don't get freaked out by, oh, am I in an older version? It doesn't matter. Then what happens is like I said, we had Selenium, Java. We needed to add something called Selenium Remote Driver. It's not going to be applied today. What's going to be when we run our tests in cloud, like one of those external services like Source Labs or Browser Stack, they provide machines for us to run our test on. Technically, they're remote drivers. They're not your local drivers. So this dependency helps us do that. And then you have a bunch of Cucumber plugin. You don't really have to know all of them, but what it is that we needed to add all of those for Cucumber to be configured, right? But they all have different responsibility. I'm not sure about a couple of those, but definitely you need the core one. Maybe you need the JUnit because Cucumber under the hood of Cucumber uses JUnit, right? We probably don't need testng, but I just kept it there. But if you wanted to run some of the testng code through Cucumber, you probably would need that. And this is the Cucumber JVM dependency, so it does something from under the hood, right? But the most importantly, if you go online and say, hey, I want to install Cucumber for Java, they're going to recommend you to get all of that, right? So that's the thing. You don't have to completely know about every single one of those, what it does. This one is for different purpose. We can ignore that for now. This is for Cucumber reporting, but we don't use that, right? But we have an extra layer of reporting, but we use some sort of better reporting than Cucumber reporting. Gherkins, we talked about gherkins. Can we explain what the gherkins are? What's a gherkin? Besides this being a small cucumber.
Basically, one like way that it's a scenario that you want to define the keywords given and then when.
Okay, that's good. That's not bad. Right. And some of the keyword it uses, like given, when, then, so it makes the, like a story-based test scenario, so to speak. Excellent. All right. Then I have added something called Allure, Cucumber JVM adapter for Allure. So Allure is a tool that provides the UI-based reporting after your test is done, right? If you came to one of my workshop, and at the end, when we went over that reporting tool, that's what Allure does that, right? Again, not something you have to worry about today. Once we get there, we'll talk about this, right? But that's the support. If you wanted reporting to be part of your test module, obviously you need to have reporting. How else people gonna know what you did, right? So we'll use this so we don't have to completely build the UI to push out. Yes, so we send reports to Allure. Allure does whatever it needs to do and makes a visual representation of that. So you can go to think of allure.com and see all your reports, so to speak. But for now, we are going to just run it locally. So we will spin up a server locally and host these artifacts and see the reports, right? Now we're not doing any of that. It's, IntelliJ has capabilities to do all this. So we just have to kind of open it and go see it. But most importantly, you don't have to go into all the details right now. All you need to understand for reporting purpose, we need this dependency. All right. And then finally, we have APM Java client. So this framework has mobile support as well, right? But you don't touch that code base. So I also want you to kind of get familiar with code base that you shouldn't be dealing with when you don't have to, right? So even when you go into a company and the code base can have a bunch of crap, right? So you can have mobile, API, web, right? There are projects that I've worked on, what I'm working on is that we have an app that is supported in Japan, Philippines, UK, US, right? So you have to automate all of that, right? So even the language changes, right? So the entire Japanese, if you're testing, testing some text and whatever, that's completely different, obviously, right? Um, but the framework has all of that, right? All the test is in the same place. So how do you kind of see? Maybe you're not responsible for the app that is hosted, in Japan or Philippines. Maybe there's other engineers that are tackling that. Now, you have to kind of, I mean, not say not go there, but don't make changes there, right? Or don't go there and break stuff there, because people are going to be upset. So I want to make sure that there are going to be code base here. Don't touch that today, right? And there's going to be code base here that you shouldn't be touching it at all without knowing what you're doing. Otherwise, you're going to break the framework, and then someone else has to look at it and fix it, right? Now, obviously, in the greater scheme of things, it's going to be hard for you to merge code if you were to make some changes on core files, right? But at the same time, I want you to kind of, make sure. I don't want you to go. I don't want you to go into a company and making changes everywhere, right? Just because something's not working. Always remember, if something's not working, it's not the framework. It's your test cases. You're writing something weird, right? So always remember that, because I had in the past students say, "Oh, it's a framework." No, I say, "Oh, no, this has been working for years now." So there is no way this is going to be breaking. But if something breaks, I'll fix it and I'll give you guys new code, right? But what I want you to understand, if something's not working, don't start, snooping around everywhere and trying to fix it. Focus on your problem, see what you're doing wrong, and let's go from there. All right. So this is for mobile related functionalities. We need to obviously add this, and then you have a bunch of code here is for reporting again, right? So don't stress about this. This is just so that we can um, sort of like decode the report and then push the artifacts to Allure, and then Allure can make the nice web page for us. All right. Any questions on pom.xml? Also, don't change stuff there, right? You don't have to touch that unless you need to add a new dependency. Yeah, no, I'm going to give you the entire framework, right? So you're just going to be focusing on writing test cases. What's up?
If we need to add more dependency, we have to go myven.com
Yes.
and find.
Yeah, so like let's say tomorrow you have to add a dependency where you have to connect to a database, right? So there are different type of database, right? SQL, Postgres, uh, MongoDB, whatever crap, right? So if you needed to connect to another database, you need to add those dependencies. I don't have them, right? So you'll go there, plug in a dependency here, and go from there. Make sense? Right. So you're always going to add new dependencies. Any questions before we move on to the next thing? Next thing is, guys, I need full attention today, right? Because I don't want to answer these questions again. Future file, right? What's the future file? So let's focus on, this is the most fun part. So this is your future file. We talked about future file. I don't know if you remember last class, right? So future file is where we write our Gherkin codes, right? I hate to say Gherkin is a code, right? But more like a Gherkin syntax to describe our test, so to speak, right? Identify our test. So in this case, we have 3 tests on future file, and these are all related to login future. So future file will always start with future at the top, right? And then whatever that future is. It could be payment, it could be login, it could be search, depending on your business, right? And then we have something called background step, right? And what background step does is this step runs before each of your tests, right? It's slightly different than before each of your before entire suite. It's not before entire suite. It's before each of your tests within this future, right? I may have another background in another future. So for instance, a messenger future, I could add something else here, right? right? That's only pertains to this future file. Make sense?
Yeah.
Right? So we need to make sure we understand what the background means. So the background means this step will execute before this one, before this one, before this one 2 times, because there is 2 different files. We'll talk about this, or 3 times actually. So before each of your tests, I'm going to execute this one. All right. Now, what's happening here is you can add any type of step. Most likely, it's going to be given because it's a setup step, right? So, in other words, otherwise, I would have to repeat this every time, right? So since I have to be at home page before I execute any of those test scenario, we just drop that into a background step and let it run over and over and over, right? So it's a little bit abstracted. So background, the purpose of background is that, but then you see these little tags, right? We have at web, at regression, and at login. Make sense? So let's say if someone wants to run all of the login scenario only. We don't care about running 1,000 test cases right now, right? So that's going to take a while. Dev team made changes only to login feature, right? So what's the point of executing payment right now? That's not the goal here. So maybe we just want to run all login features. Maybe I have 25 scenarios here. So if we run by this tag called @log, think of a command, right? Think of a command like maven run @login, right? It will only run this future file. Make sense, right? And we can quickly give results back to the dev team saying, hey, whatever changes you made, it's totally fine because our login feature, passed. And once we do full regression, that's when we can run payment, login, messengers, all the other ones. What's up?
So it would obviously run, for example, login 1 if you're only specifying login 1, right? Or would it run all the login?
If we specify at login, it will run all of them. If we specify login 1, it will only run this, right? So I just want to see how we kind of broke this into different, kind of like how directories are, right? So that you can get to a point where you're only running one, because you have to run a single one when you're writing your test. How would you debug that if you don't know how to run a single test? So let's say if I'm working on this, I can't just run everything, when I'm debugging my test, right? So you may not run this at a CI level, right? When we are running on a server, but when you are writing this test, it's very important that you can run a single test because you're going to be running this 100 times maybe if it's a a complex test where you're debugging a lot of different things. Okay, but we'll go to individual one a little bit. Now you can add as many tags as you want, right? But that has to mean something. And then we have another tag called @regression. So if I go into Messenger, right, I have a Messenger, which is this tag pertains to only Messenger scenarios. Now I could have multiple future file that represents Messenger scenario, right? Because Messenger could be huge. Maybe Messenger has 50 test scenario. So I don't want to put all 50 in one file and make it a mess. So I might have 5 different files divided into 10 test cases, but they all are Messenger test cases, right? So everywhere you see a Messenger test cases, we'll put tag @Messenger. And then we have, if we go back to our login, you see regression is everywhere. If you see regression here, you'll see regression here, right? So what regression means, hey, we want to make a release tomorrow or day after tomorrow, whatever, this week. I want you guys to run the full regression end to end. So that means I want to run all of my features. So that could be hundreds of scenarios, right? And I want to make sure everything passes before we go into production. Make sense? Right? So we kind of broke it down to these tags. And then finally, you might be asking, well, why do you have web here, right? Well, we needed to have web because we also have mobile test cases. So you might have a mobile test cases within the same framework. You might have an API test cases within the same framework, right? Because if you don't specify, we have to write a logic somewhere. Hey, if it's web, then do this. If it's mobile, then do something else, right? Because otherwise, when you're kicking off stuff, it's going to start looking for iOS devices and the web page, right? So there's a reason we put this. It's not to run only all mobile tests. It's for logic reason, but also if you wanted to run all web tests, you can probably use that. If you can only run only mobile tests, you can also use that. All right, make sense? So if your test case is web-based, I want you to put at web, at regression. Don't introduce new tags unless it means something, right? So you have to justify why you added a new tag. And there could be a valid reason for it, but make sure you know what you're doing. Any question on tags and background?
In text, this is syntax, yeah? First, we need to put web or mobile, after regression, and after our test case.
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
This is syntax, yeah?
Yeah.
First one must be web or
No, it could be,
or we can.
but follow my pattern, right? It doesn't have to be, first doesn't have to be web. You could put web at the last, right? But don't go changing that stuff, right? Let's stick with the pattern. Now, it might not get an error, so I could put web here and it will do the same job, right? But it kind of looks shitty, right? If you're kind of going around and things are all over the place. So organize that way the framework is organized, right? But I want to also make sure that you can have the tags back and forth. Doesn't matter, right? All right. The next thing I want to focus on is the scenario tag, right? The scenario is just, it doesn't do anything. It's just for a descriptive reason, right? So so then you have your login tag, and then you have your, login one means I'm just focusing on this specific tag, right? So you can't have a duplicate tag anywhere in your code base. Otherwise, it's going to, so what it does is, what the compiler does is, it goes into this future directory, looks for this tag name, whatever you're running, right? Like I said, in terminal, we can just say, hey, login, whatever. And it goes into that, compiles all of that, and looks for these tags, right? Like it contains keyword or whatever, right? And then when it finds all of this, it puts it into a list, right? Hey, I have 5 login test scenario, and then runs synchronously, run one after another. Make sense, right? So that's pretty much what it's doing. So if you have multiple tags with the same name, it will create that list with a multiple tag base. So it's really not that complex, but that's how it's kind of built. But anyhow, scenario is what your scenario name is, and then we can use, if it's not a given step, it's a when step, which is an action. I enter this username into username text field on home screen. But when you see this blue thing, right? Yeah. So when you see this blue, that means it's a parameter, right? I can add anything here. It just takes a string. So it could be literally anything. And it will pretty much does that. And we'll talk about how we did that, right? And then you have username. Now this is not gonna work, right? Because this is more like a drop down, right? And we'll totally, I'll explain it to you how that works, right? So because I wanted to control how many fields, it's not like a random fields there. We have on homepage, we have username, password, first name, last name, email, password, and phone number, I think, right? So we have all those, and we needed to pull them in a list. So you're not just choosing a random field and trying to enter it, okay? So this concept is called regex, and we'll talk about this when we go to step definitions. But this is your test case, and then I enter test 1, 2, 3, 4 into a password text field, and then I click on login button on home screen. Then I verify that I am in. Well, that's not the sentence is correct, but I'm an invalid login page. Make sense? So that's kind of what we are trying to build. So let's make this change. real quick. You see, as soon as I change this, what happens is this becomes invalid. Now I can no longer, your compiler no longer understands this anymore, right? So what you have to do is you have to change that text. So this concept is called regex. So the technology that they use is called regex. It's like more like a text pattern. It looks for a text pattern within your code base, and the same pattern has to be on your before your method name, right? So that way, your method will understand. I mean, this will look for the method that implemented this, right? So that's what pretty much how Cucumber works. All right. Any questions?
Why it's called cucumber?
Sorry?
Why there this app called cucumber?
Oh, well, I think because in all the tests you want it to be green, and cucumber is like a green thing, right?
Makes sense.
you, you don't want to call something like red or something like that. That shows. So I'm able to answer anything because I have a 4-year-old, right? And he asks a lot of questions.
You get out of this one.
Right? So he other day he's like, why can't we go to Mars? He's right there. So it's that kind of question. See, if you go there, you can't come back. I did tell him that we can go there though. I lie a lot. So anyhow, so this is our first scenario, and then our second scenario is pretty much the same thing. Um, and the third scenario that I want to kind of focus on, and you see how I have other steps, but these are not implemented. There is no Java code to back this up. So if you run this, it's just going to say unimplemented test scenarios. Make sense? The last one is interesting, right? So let's say if you have a test scenario that needs to get executed multiple times with different test data sets, right? So let's say you have, I think we did this, right? We had this invalid email. so you had like about 12 test cases, and now if you go back and implement this, you'll be like, oh, this is super easy, because all you had to do is you wanted to make sure that those 12 test cases come back as a fail or whatever, pass, right? Or invalid test scenarios, right? So you will list all of them into this example table and label them. Think of our Excel sheet, right? So think of this as an Excel sheet or a database, it doesn't matter. This is your column name, right? And these are your rows, right? And on your test scenario, you plug in the column name that you want it to be as part of your test data, right? And so in here, I enter username, right? So on your first test run, it will grab the first row. Well, in second row, first row is a column name. Second row, on your second test, it will grab this. On your third test, so it's actually 3 tests here, right? It's the same scenario, but it's 3 different tests with 3 different data sets. So in the past, what we had to do is, you don't want to know, right? But we used to have these Excel sheets, right? And like I think when I first built a framework a long time ago, around 2010 or something, we didn't have Cucumber. So what we had to do is we would put all of the tests, it's called data-driven set of testing, everything in an Excel, right? And then we had to build a Java class, which is an Excel reader, right? And you might go into a company that has that now still, right? Because you got to move into Cucumber entirely for you to use this feature. And then we will read the first test data as the column X, X, Y, Z, and the second, and so forth, and all of that. So the most importantly, I just want you to understand that this is much simpler, whereas reading it from Excel and writing a Java class to read, and then also your Java class is to understand which row is what, right? Now, it's not hard. Like there's a bunch of example on Google of how to read from Excel, but it's just harder to maintain because now you have to maintain this another file, XLS file, right? And then be able to read that. Some people went above and beyond with putting the stuff in database, which just makes no sense, right? So sometimes people make things more complex. It doesn't have to be, right? It just sounds cool to get it from a database and run it, and right? No, it doesn't have to be that way. We can put everything into a future file unless you're running 1 million test data sets, and I don't see a reason to do that. Okay. Um, and then you say, okay, I enter password. You see, now I'm calling this column, and you could have more columns, right? Long as you follow this pattern. But when you have a test data driven test, make sure it's not saying scenario. It's saying what? Scenario outline. Make sense? All right. So scenario outline means your compiler knows that there's a table underneath. So when your compiler goes in, and then now it's looking for something called examples. So once it reads an example, it does whatever it needs to do to make that into a test. What's up?
So since you have 3 tags over here, login 1, 2, 3, that is the reason it's going to run it 3 times.
No.
So how
It's
does it
going to
know-
run 3 times because you have 3 different rows.
Yeah, that's because you have 3 different tags.
No, let's not think about tags. There's nothing to do with tags, right? Just to avoid confusion, get rid of all these tags. There's nothing to do with tags, right? It knows it needs to run 3 times because it has 3 different rows with 3 different data sets, right?
If you add more,
If we add more, it's going to run 4 times, 5 times. It doesn't matter, right?
So why can't you just have one scenario created for all for these
We
different
could,
tasks?
but this is just for example purpose. I'm doing that. Okay, so let's not go into. Okay, I'm going to delete this for you. Okay, think of this scenario. We are running in the scenario outline. Let's not simplify what we have. This is just for demo purpose. I just want you to not get confused at all. All right? Don't worry, you get your chances to work on cool scenarios. Make sense? Everyone understands this? What's up? No, we're not gonna have that. If you have that, then we have to figure some other ways to test this, not through Cucumber. This is to focus on functional testing.
So basically, in a real time, like scenario, for example, they give you a ticket to solve, right? So first you go and write all these scenarios.
Well, it depends. Like some companies where you have manual testers going writing this, I don't suggest that, right? If I go into a company, I'm going to say no to this, right? Because that person is writing from their own perspective, not from engineering perspective, maybe. So you might have to rewrite this scenario anyway, right? So what I would prefer is they write whatever way they write their test cases. It doesn't matter. They could write a traditional like step by process. They just give you a walkthrough of what they want to be automated. You take that concept and then you write your own your future file, and then automate that and go from there. So at least, well, either you or one of your colleague, right? So that manual testers are not coming and writing this. But some places, whatever the workflow is,
I'm just a little confused with. So, for example, you want to do like a certain thing, right? You get a certain ticket to solve, right? And then you write all this dirt and story, and then you want to start solving, and you want to have a landing page and a driver factory. That's another framework, right? That's a Selenium thing, right? That's
well,
another framework.
everything this is no longer Selenium anymore.
Yeah. So where do you? My thing is like, how do you? So test is run in a different class where you just call the methods and you just write pretty much.
We don't do that anymore.
Okay.
Think of test is running from here. This is driving your test from now on. Now, this is not going to get executed. We have not done our second part yet. This is not going to get executed unless you have a Java code backing this up, which is called the glue code, right? So this is kind of, just for look purpose and maintaining purpose, we have this, right? So we're not maintaining that external Excel sheet. We're not communicating with another tool or something like that. Everything is in one place. Our test case is in one place. Our automation scripts in one place. Make sense? So to drive this, we still need the Java code, obviously, right? And that's the glue code we're going to learn about in our second part. Okay?
Yeah, no, I understood that everything is a Java code. I'm just thinking that, when you write a Java code, so you call like the tag of entity.
We will still do that. We'll still have to do that. That doesn't go away. So whatever you kind of worked on so far, that still stays. We are refactoring some of the way we've been doing, right? And it's not double work. I heard that. It's not double work. Okay? Once you learn how to work on this, you're gonna like it.
I just wanted to know, I didn't say that.
It's your brother, so.
I have a question. Can you change the first logging test? We can refactor this one because you changed it to place on method and
Yeah, if you make some text change here, it will break, right? So by seeing this, you know that something is broken here. So you have to figure out a way to solve that. But for now, let's just
no. I mean, if you refactoring, it's automatically changing.
no,
there
no.
or not?
You have to change that
Okay.
manually.
Is
The-
there anything to do with future file?
Future file? Yeah, this is everything is in future file.
So when you test it in the future, or
What do you mean?
what is future?
Well, that's not something I decided. This is something the tool kind of create the. But I'm maybe we're missing your questions, right? What's your actual question?
Like we have to test it, right?
Yeah.
Scenario. So it needs to become today or present. So
No, that has nothing to do. It's not about that future. It's not future. This is. Yeah, sometimes we have same word, same pronunciation, but two different meanings, right? That future is FU, right? So when you get a job, that's in future, right? This is more like modules. Like this future means more like, okay, you have search, you have payments, right? Okay. Yeah, we're gonna be running the test today, just in case you're wondering. All right. Any questions on this future file? I'm never gonna forget this now. This is amazing. Any question on this file? Are we all good? About online? Okay, cool. The next step is, let's go into this thing. What time is it? It's 40 minutes. I don't want to overload you with this stuff. Once you come back, we'll do step definitions. All right. So when you go to an interview, right, one of the very common question is asked, walk me through your framework that you have worked on. So what you want to do is, you just want to pretty much walk through these 8 things, right? Write like a little paragraph about each of those things, and then have it ready and talk for 5 minutes, right? Talk about how maybe that person, they're not using this technology, right? Maybe they want to build something new. So you want to talk about what a pom.xml does. You want to talk about your directory structure. And then you want to talk about your future file, step definitions, shared step definition, test runners, which we're going to go over each one of those. Yes, I am recording. Yeah, it's kind of important to record today. And then, guys, let's focus. Let's focus, right? Um, and then you want to talk about your config property files, and then run your test. How do you run your test, right? So let's just kind of focus on each one of those steps, and then we go from that. I kind of somehow missed the directory structure, so let's talk about this before we go to step definitions. So I wanted to divide this into a little bit more better way we can view this. So this is your project. When we created the project, you see this part, ignore it. Always ignore it, right? This orange part. This is a local file, right? So when Java kind of compiles it, actually this is the file that originally gets executed, but you don't have to worry about it. When Java compiles it, it creates kind of like an artifact, and it dumps it onto this folder, and it does some stuff, right? But you don't do anything here. Just leave that the way it is. And if you delete this, every time you run a code, it will come back again, all right? So you have your SRC source folder. After your source folder, I have something called test, right? Because we are dealing with test. And then we have something called Java and resources. Anything that is not a Java code, it will go onto resource folder, right? So technically, all our futures code are not Java code, right? They're future code, which is Cucumber code, Gherkin type of code. And they're going to be dumping here. So tomorrow you might have something else that is not futures, maybe Excel file, right? Or maybe some sort of there's something called XML, YAML file or XML file. So things that are not Java code based, we'll try our best to put it on resource. Like there might be some cases where we have to put it somewhere else. But in this case, we will try our best to put it on resources. So there's an objective of all this. There's a reason why we have the way things we are, right? And then you have your Java folder. Java folder also broken into 3 different directories. You have the framework related folders, and then you have your step definitions, and then you have your util, right? What does the framework has? Well, framework has a bunch of stuff. Framework has any pages that pertains to mobile. We have a mobile pages. All our mobile pages will be here. Now, obviously, this is a small project, so it's not Facebook is not a small project, but we are just kind of starting up. So, but in theory, they will have another layer of directories, right? Like maybe payments, maybe search, right? Maybe orders, things like that. So we can modularize even at that level, right? Even payment might be so big, right? Because you don't want to put 1,000 pages here. It's not gonna make sense, right? But for now, we're just going to keep it simple. So mobile pages, we have home screen, main menu, and splash screen, which you don't have to worry about now because that's not what we're working on these next 2 weeks. And then we have the web pages. Web page is anything whenever you deal with web page, right? We have APM wrapper. Don't worry about that. But this is related to mobile, right? So if you click on this, there's a bunch of stuff here, right? So, but this is all mobile specific stuff, right? But like I said, next couple of weeks, you do not open this file, right? Because there's no reason for you to get confused here and work on it, all right? And then you have mobile base page. Similar to web base page, well, things are different with mobile. How we click and how we do a lot of things, a little bit more complex, right? So let's say if you wanted to swipe horizontally, you have to get your screen size, calculate it, do some math to make sure the right places where swiping and scrolling. So this kind of stuff, we are not going to deal with it now. We'll deal with it when we get there. And then you have your test runner that actually execute the test case, right? Your Cucumber tags that pretty much runs all of it. Now we'll go over that a little later. So that's what we have in framework. Now the question is, tomorrow there is some new stuff that's coming out, right? Or you need to add some API related tests. We're making a call to the API server and doing some request response kind of stuff. If it's framework related, it has to dump into the framework folder, right? Do not dump it into util or some resources. So that means you're not able to design it correctly. You have to kind of put the right stuff in the right place so we can find it when things get bigger, right? Step definitions is obviously we're going to talk about what a step definition is in a little bit, but anything step definition related, it has to be on that folder, right? Because if it's not on that folder, it will not run, right? Because when we configured our tests, we told them to look for step definition on this path. Make sense? Right? So if you have a step definition that's sitting on a framework layer, it's never going to catch that. So your future file would be invalid, in other words, right? So make sure you're following these rules. And then you have your util folder. Right now we just have something called config reader, right? What this reader does is, you know how we've been entering our URL on the code base actually. We don't want to do that anymore. What we're going to be doing is, we're going to be running, if you're running it on Facebook, you just update it in this file, right? But if you're running it on hotels, you just update that URL, and that's it. And if your Chrome driver path is different than this, you'll just update it here. So you don't want anyone to change strings and stuff on a code base, right? So if anyone messes this up, it doesn't matter for us. We can always, it's just a text, right? But we have this reader file that reads this. What is this crap? So it reads this, whatever here, that's what it's going to read. So I'm going to walk you through how it's implemented and stuff. Now, tomorrow, let's say you're dealing with dates, right? Dates is not base page actions. Does that make sense? Base page is only specific to Selenium related stuff that deals with page. Date could be another util itself. So you can create specific method that gets you current date, or you can create it in a way it can select any dates, right? So like let's say, I want to select 7 days from today or 8 days from today. All they have to pass in is the value of how many days from today, right? So you don't want to keep rewriting this stuff. You can create a new util file called date util and create those public static methods, and anyone can access it. Why is it public static? Right. Right. So any classes can pretty much access it, right? So that's the whole point of static. I want to be, because it's a class data also, right? So you see how Java's helping you right now a little bit? Actually, a lot. Everything is Java. Any questions so far? That's a good question. What goes on resources? What do we say about resources? Anything that is not Java code. Test runner is a Java code, right? Look at that. It's a C, right? So that means it's a Java code. You're going against the rule, right? So, but test runner, this is your test runner. Okay? So anything that goes under resources, it has to be non-Java code. Okay? Okay, that's fine. We want to make these mistakes now, right? So we're not confused next week. So what I really want you to focus on, the next week is going to be a little bit challenging. I want you to focus on the test scenario. I don't want you to focus on building framework or fixing this, right? These people waste time, this kind of stuff, right? Because in reality, it's going to be hard for you to go into a job and build framework like that, right? So what you really need to, this is pretty lightweight, right? So because different requirements come at you. Because they might say, you know what, I want you to implement something that mocks call from different IP addresses, from different locations. So, right? So let's say you're working for Netflix. And if you watching Netflix from or Amazon from India, right? It's going to show you all the kind of the Indian shows, or Japan is going to be Japan specific shows, or whatever may be the case. So what if they have to make you do that? So you can just do this framework and implement it. So what I would recommend is learn how to use it, and also focus on getting the work done, which is the scenario. So next 2 weeks, I don't want you to struggle with framework. That's why I'm not letting you build this stuff. I want you to focus on actual things that you're going to be working on, right? And that's what's going to kind of help you get a job, right? Okay. I hate to mention the job part over and over, but that's kind of what we hear, right? Um, and that should not be the motivation, right? Because if that's the only motivation, I think you're in trouble. You have to kind of like this stuff in a weird way, right? You have to kind of enjoy it, and otherwise, how can you work 8-10 hours a day on this stuff, right? All right. So, any question on directory structure? All right. So let's go over our step definitions. Let's close all these things. All right. So now let's open this. So usually what I like to do is for every future, there is a step definition for that, right? So let's say you have a future file called login. We could have a multiple future file that is login specific, but we'll have one step definition file for that, right? So if you, but usually try to keep a one-to-one at this stage. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. So, for instance, I have this login specific things, right? So we have a login.future, but you see how we have login SD. So SD is kind of a post acronyms for step definitions, right? And you can name it anyhow. It doesn't have to be that. So now you have login future. So all of these things that you see implemented for login screen, we have it on login SD. So the way we can access them, obviously you can click it here, but let's try going through this thing. And now we have all of that stuff here, right? So now we'll take it one step at a time. It's not hard. It's pretty easy, actually. It's just I have to explain it to you one time. But let's look into the background step, which is I am on login page, right? I'm on home page. So I also decided to put this here. So since this is a setup step, right? And to be honest with you, it doesn't matter if you put a given, then, or when, right? Because under the hood, think of all of them as like add test. Remember we had add test? All of them does the same thing. It doesn't matter what you put in here. But if you put a then here, it will not make sense what you're trying to say, right? That's kind of the whole purpose of that, right? So since this is a setup step, all we are doing is like, hey, when it goes to homepage, and we are not handling how we go to the URL, not here. We are going to do, remember we had driver factory? We have something similar, and we'll handle it there, and I'll walk you through that later. But let's assume we got there. When we got there, how do we know we are at homepage? So we do a quick assertion here, you see? We're saying, hey, get me the title. And you see how we had driver factory? Now we have something called share SD, right? Share definition for all of the step definitions, right? We can also, might well just call it driver factory, right? That's not gonna change things. Get driver, get me the title, and then expect this URL to, this should be the title. So we're doing the very first check to make sure we are at homepage. Make sense? Right? And how does it know? And you see how we put in annotations? We are used to annotation because we've done at override, right? Remember override, overload from Java, right? So overriding is something that we have done. So here we are saying, hey, this method is going to behave as a cucumber sort of method, right? And we can pass in a text here, and this is called regex, right? This is called regex text. So what a regex does is it's a pattern matching, right? Text sequence pattern matching, right? So we'll split this and explain it to you. So when we have a step called given I am on home page, I had to have the same text here, right? And you see this sign here. This means regex starts from I, right? And you see this dollar symbol. That means regex ends here. So then now your compiler knows when to start, when to end, right? Make sense? So this is the very easy one, which that doesn't have any parameter or anything like that. But that's pretty much how it works. You don't make it complicated for yourself, right? Hey, I need to have the same text that I have here, and it has to be top of the method that method that supplies the glue code for this, right? Because without this, this doesn't work anymore, right? It's going to say it's unimplemented. So this is kind of what you're seeing on a web. Like think of like how we use our web pages, right? You don't really know how submit buttons got implemented. You just use it. So same thing here is that you don't have to know how every single step is working, long as you know that there is some code that drives it, right? And you can go into a company where you may have to refactor a lot of this stuff, right? Maybe they have this whole module that is broken. They made some changes to their web page. Now you have to go fix them, right? Anyhow, so this is where we are. I am on home page. Any questions so far?
Your method name and your given name has to be same, or you just named it?
No, that doesn't have to be same. I just.
But then your given name and
Method has nothing to do with it.
your at given I'm on home page and all that has to be same for you.
Well,
Obviously, it has to be.
your future file step name has to be the same as your glue code step definition name.
And it's not going to work if it's a different name.
No, because again, the concept is text pattern. That's how they implemented this thing. And text pattern is something called regex in any programming, right? So regex is supported in all languages. That's why Cucumber applies to all languages. It's not just to Java. So if you go into JavaScript, they have Cucumber. If you go into Cucumber, Python or any, it doesn't matter. Ruby is where it started. But you can go to any languages, they have it because regex is everywhere. Okay. The second one, however, it's not complicated. It's something different, right? So we have this step called I enter this username into username text field on home screen. And the question here is that, well, I'm able to enter any crap here, and it says it's fine, right? The reason for that is, well, I'm saying I enter and I had this parentheses with dot plus. What that means is, give me anything. Like I'll accept anything in that position, long as there's no space. As soon as you add a space, that means it's thinking it's a new text, right? So give me anything here and I'll accept it. Now, obviously, this cannot go into your method parameter. It has to bypass through some local variable. So what we've done is, we can actually make this a little bit better than how I've written it. I'm refactoring this now. Well, actually it's not just email, okay. So we'll say something like value. Alright? So what we are saying is, hey, let's say this Mohammed at Technosoft Academy IO. I'm accepting anything here. It will grab this and dump it into this local variable, right? And then we can pass this value into our email, password, first name. Obviously, it's going to be different for each of those names, right? But it doesn't matter. They're all form of strings, okay? If you're confused, it's totally fine. And then we have, do we understand this step, what it does? Are we all clear here? Okay. And then I'm saying, hey, I enter whatever into username, and then I'm dividing this by pipe symbols, right? So what this does is, you cannot decide your own field. And it makes sense, right? Because if you try to now enter data into messenger field, right, but messenger field does not exist on your home page, right? It's going to keep throwing you error, or it's complicated. And another reason we are doing this, because a lot of people are going to use this, right? There's other engineers that's going to use what you are building today. Because let's say if any point someone wants to log in, it's very easy for them now. They never have to build this ever again. All they have to say, hey, when I enter, and it's available for them, right? And it's telling you, hey, the first parameter passing is a string, and it doesn't matter what it is. But the second parameter, I need you to select one of those, okay? So when we do this, it gives us these options, right? So let's set first parameter, we'll say test at test.com, but it's still invalid, right? Because we have to select one of those fields, because that's what we have in login page, and we'll delete all of that, and it becomes available for her. So when you do this, so you click on your field here, and then you have to write a quick logic here, right? So if you say username, we say username, right? So what I will do is I will take this value and store it into this text field, a local variable. And then we are saying, hey, do a switch here. If it's username, then homepage, enter email, and then break out. If it's password, homepage, enter password. If it's first name, homepage, enter first name, and so forth. And let's say tomorrow they add another field. It's very easy for you now. You have to add it here as another pipe symbol and say, I don't know, another field, right? And then write a quick logic here saying case and then home page. Obviously, we don't have another field, right? But it will do the same thing. So it's a little bit more simplified. So these are the stuff you'll continue to have to update, remove, refactor, maintain, right? This is kind of your code base, and if you're responsible for that area of the application, then you definitely have to do those things, right? There might be a company where you're the only one that's doing all of these things, right? But anyhow, do you understand so far those two regex? Now you can go online and learn about regex, but we're not becoming a regex specific devs, right? So I don't want you to invest so much time, 3 weeks learning regex. It's not going to add a lot of value because we only use like 3 or 4 or 5 stuff from regex, right? But as you need more, you can Google things out because there's so many patterns you can kind of set, and we can use that. We can force user to set those values, all right? But so far, for me, like those two pretty much will do your work for the rest of the time here. Do we all understand this?
Can we have some requirements for value user and active, for example, login? Can we write some requirements like gmail.com? But now you can write whatever you want.
Here?
Yeah,
Oh, I see what you're saying. Like, can we make a pattern?
yeah.
We can do that. With regex, you can make any pattern. You can say, hey, end of your string has to be at gmail.com, right? We can do so many different ways, right? We can pretty much reset this value here, right? We can say value equals to value plus at Gmail. So anything you kind of dump in here, it will extend that to you, right? But any question you ask, it can be implemented, but is that helpful, right? You always got to ask yourself, like, do I need to do this, right? If not, then you don't have to do that. But you can also write a pattern here saying, hey, the first values could be one thing, and then the last value, yes. and that's what regex will do for you. But we don't want to go too deep into customizing those patterns. Not today. If we have to, you can pretty much spend like one weekend and learn about regex. But I don't want you to do that this weekend. Okay. When we have time, or when you have time, you're gonna continue have to learn new things, right? You're going to have to learn regex, how date works, how database works, right? These are kind of part of your skill set now, right? You have a little bit of foundation now, but now you have to keep adding things. Oh, how iOS app works. Well, if you care about your career, right? How Android works, right? So you have to continue to learn technology, right? When I started my career, I was doing some VB scripting. I don't even know this language anymore, right? Because moved away so much from it. Now it's more mobile specific, latest technology. So you have to continuously learn if you want to continue to grow, right? Because tomorrow it's going to be AI based stuff, right? Machine learning things. So a lot of data science related frameworks and things like that that you may have to learn, to progress in your career. So to answer your question, yes, that can be done, but you have to know regex really well. Okay,
Okay, where are you putting the lookators for user?
we'll get there. All right, that does not change. The second part of that framework, the only part we've changed, we updated is instead of having the traditional method to drive your test cases, we have a step definition that drives it, which is pretty much controlled by your feature file. All right. But do you understand these two things? And then we have two buttons that we are dealing with. We have I click on login and create account, right? We don't have that here, right? But like a submit button or something like that, right? So you can easily do this. So whatever button, I usually just try to do this. I go through each page, what a page can have, right? A page can have text field, a drop down, or like a submit button. Just create 3 different methods that handles all of that, right?
For every page.
Yeah, whatever page you go to, like just get all your text into one step definition, and then get another step definition. All of your other controls into another step definitions. If you have drop down, you can write it however you want. But you kind of end up living with like only few methods, right? And that's driving so much of your test. So this is called modularizing and designing and all of that stuff. But this is where you have to get a little smarter because no one's gonna hold your hand here, right? You're gonna have to continue to adopt, learn, simplify. Like don't get settled with just how I'm doing it, right? So that's kind of where you have to kind of get involved. So let's just submit button and we'll remove this. We do have a submit button there, right? We have a login button, and then we have a bunch of links there, right? Messenger links. So create another one. So hey, I click on whatever link from homepage, right? So you can kind of also do that, and you don't have to put all the links at once. As you run into new ones, you add them, right? So you don't have to have that code in your code base. Verification stays the same, but you have to have something like, oh, I verify that I am on invalid login page. So you do an assert equal, get page header, right? And log into Facebook. You also do another one for get error message for invalid sign up. So let's say if you are trying to log in with invalid email or register with invalid email, you can verify that as well. So assert stuff doesn't really change, right? So that still stays the same. Pretty much that's your step definition, and whatever page login step definition is interacting with, you just make those objects as a field variable, right? So you have your home page and you have your login page. So to answer your questions, nothing changed, right? You still you have all your stuff here, and that pretty much your base page, right? So
Just that is going to make our lives easier.
no, nothing changed,
No,
right?
but it's not making our life easier.
No,
It's making it more complex.
sometimes you have to go through a little pain to find some happiness. Maybe coding is not for you. No, it's for all of you. Any questions? All right, what do we do next? So you have your future file. So I'm decided to. I'll give you guys a homework, but Monday we'll kick off our project Monday, right? So Sunday night, e- expect to see an email from Atlassian. That's the tool where I'll assign you the work. It's a Jira pretty much, right? Give you a quick walkthrough when you're here. It's just a project management tool, right? So nothing. Don't make it a big deal. So I'll put it there. I'll assign it to you guys, and then you can kind of work based off those tickets. Um, Other than that, yeah, so that's kind of what we will pretty much do next 2 weeks. So again, think of today is your first day at work, and you get about 3 days to understand this framework, and then starting Monday, I want you to start working, okay, without getting paid. So that's that. All right, what else are we missing? Shared step definition. Well, shared step definition is nothing but a driver factory, right? Um, So if you look at share step definitions, we have config reader, right? So I guess before we go into share step definition, let's talk about config reader, right? So I think it will make our life easier. So config reader is stored at a root level. So we have this file, we have this map, right? You have a key and a value. I think you guys did hash map, right? Do we do hash map? Yeah. So we have a key and a value. What we want to do is we want to be able to read this value by using these keys. So the whole point of keeping this code outside of your directories, so that if someone wants to mess around with this code, I mean, with this test, they want to run it in. You see how for mobile it makes more sense? Oh, I want to run it in this version on this device, right? You can keep changing this stuff up, and it will not affect your code, right? So if someone were to make some errors, it's not gonna affect it. Also, when you're doing a hotels.com versus Facebook, right? You can just change the URL here. Also, if you all of you, if you have a different Chrome path, you will just make a change here. Make sense? And we'll have a method that will read these values into the code. So for us to read data from this properties file, essentially it's a text file, right? For us to read these values, we have to create another helper class, right? So it can tunnel through that class and then goes into your code base, right? So when we say config reader, we had to create a field variable for each one of those guys, right? So URL, Chrome driver, mobile platform, don't worry about those for now, okay? But for each of those values, we needed to create a field variable. And then I just got lazy, but we did everything in a constructor, all the setting, right? We don't want to be able to set this value somewhere else. So all it's doing is, first we had to create this object called properties, right? And then we're still not using it, but then we have something called input stream. We use this to read and write to a file. Sometimes you might want to write to an external file, or you might want to read from it. But in our case, we are pretty much reading from it. We're not writing anything to a file. And then we're saying, hey, input, I want to set this input to new file input stream config.properties. The reason I don't have to give path because it's at a root level, right? Automatically assumes it's at a root level. But if it was in, like, let's say resources, all you have to do is src resources, and it will pretty much read it from there, okay? So, but for now, we have it at a root level, so just to now simplify things. And then once we set this input, we use this property object to load it. Now, I'm explaining all this, but doesn't mean you don't have to worry about this at all, right? But what it's doing is, I'm saying, hey, using this property object, I want to be able to load whatever this guy, whatever we have set here, right? And once we do this, rest of the part is pretty much easy. We're saying, hey, this URL, this field variable, set this field variable with the property URL. Make sense? So we are getting all URL will be set to the value here. Chrome driver path will be the set to value here. So we are doing all the setting here. This is just a quick try catch to make sure we close the file, right? Because if you open a file, you have to close it. Otherwise, it's going to stay open for you all the time. So that's why we have a finally catch here. Don't stress about that too much. But most importantly, what you really need to understand is that this field variable now set with whatever mapping values that we have here. And then finally, I have a getter for them. That's it, right? So if you need to get a URL, you'll just say, hey, config reader.get URL, config reader get this, blah, 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 whatever, right? So tomorrow, if you need to add a new value that you don't want people to touch your code to change it, or maybe an interchangeable value, the value that changes continuously, you might want to do that, the same thing. You might want to go here, create a key and a value, and then create a field variable here, and read that in this constructor, and then create a getter for it. So anyone be able to do that, all right? So now if we go back to our shared SD, I created created an object for config reader, and now I have access to those URL, those Chrome path, those mobile versions, mobile devices, all of those crap, right? So we're saying system.setProperty. The reason we didn't have to do this outside, because this is pretty much constant. It's not going to change. We have to have webdriver.chrome to set a Chrome driver, right? So you have to ask yourself which value is going to continuously change and which value is going to always stay static. If that's going to be static, then you can hard code it, because no one's going to come and change that unless like a major Chrome makes a big change, and that means it will be a part of your refactoring. And then you say config reader.chrome driver path. You see now we are not hard coding the path here. We are reading it from this getter, and this getter was set through Chrome driver path here, and that points it to that map here. Again, you might be saying, well, this is nonsense. Why are you doing all this work? You can just write it here, right? Well, that's not the right practice. That's not the right engineering practice for long term, right? So when you have thousands of lines of code, and also when you onboard someone new, it's going to be hard for them to understand if you just do whatever you think is right, right? So you have to have some strategy, some sort of method to your craziness. And then everything else stays the same. We are doing the driver equals to new Chrome driver. We put this dummy implicit weight, and then I'll say driver.get config reader.get URL. So you can use either navigate.to or you can do get. They both do the same thing. Config reader.get URL, and it's also pretty much easier to read that, and that will pretty much read this URL. All right. So this will run before your test, and this will run after your test. Background also runs before your test, but it's specific to the individual features. Okay. The reason I had to put @web here, because for mobile we don't use this. We do it a different way. But if we don't put this web here, web annotations, what happens is it's going to also run for mobile. So if I'm running an iOS test, it's going to also open up a browser and leave it there, right? So what we had to say is that if we say @web, that means, hey, every time a future file, where is this? If there is a future file that has web on it, then only run this before, right? Otherwise, don't touch this share.sd. Like I said, mobile is a little bit more complex. We do it in slightly different ways. But most importantly, that's all you have to take away from that. Any questions? And we still have the get driver, static get driver, right? Now you may have another scenario where you may have to run another before function, right? So or after function, like let's say maybe you're doing some cleanup or like whatever you want to test junk that you created, you want to remove that from a database, right? So you can also, like let's say if you have another scenario that needs to run before, you'll just call it like API tag. So in this case, this will only run when an API test is sort of running, right? So, Cucumber has a lot of functionality. We can go through each one of those, right? But what we need to understand is that same thing with Selenium. We can we'll be here for 2 years if we do that. But what we really need to understand is that if you need to do anything Cucumber related, let's go into the documentations, right? Let's start learning how to read the documentations and understand from that and move on from it. Any questions so far on shared step definitions? All right. That leads us to we still haven't run the test, right? That leads us to test runner page. And test runner object. There's a bunch of stuff here again, right? But it's a one-time setup. What it's doing is we're saying, hey, this pretty much drives your test, right? We are saying run with cucumber.class. So now the compiler knows, hey, I need to run this as a cucumber base, right? However they build it. And while we're running this, we have to set some options. First two, you can pretty much ignore those two. We don't really use them. What it does is it just sets up a report, like a cucumber report. Like I said, we don't use cucumber report, so we can ignore that. Second one is like if you don't have a implemented method, it kind of creates this dummy body for you, right? Which we don't use it. Futures, you have to specify where is your future file is. Make sense? So like here, we have our future files here, right? So we're saying, hey, and everything starts from source, so to speak, right? So source, go to source, open test, look for resources, and then you have your futures file here, right? So now you're telling pad to your future file so that now Cucumber understand which file to do the search. Remember when we did the tags? So Cucumber will pretty much get all of those futures and look for those tags that you kind of specified, right? Then the specify tag to be executed. So in our case, we want to execute only at login. So whatever tag you specify here, that's what's going to get executed. All right?
It means just login one.
Yeah, it's just going to be
login.
Then it will run all three, right? Then specify step definition package name. You have to also specify where is your glue code for this future file. The reason I said definitions, it doesn't require the full path. It just needs to know from a Java level, it automatically be able to read up to Java, and it's saying, okay, this is the folder that has all the step definitions on it. If you have subfolders, that's totally fine. I think it would be able to read it. Make sense? Well, you can have it, right? You have to say mobile login one. You cannot have a duplicate tag names. So in that case, we have to rename these and say web login and mobile login. That's a really good question, actually. Any other questions? All right. So that was an easy one. So let's run this. So now, from now on, you'll only run this class. No, like every class is not executable, right? So you might want to just go into your runner. What is it? Yeah, you leave that empty. So it's doing what it needs to kind of do, right? So now you get to really see, how it's happening. One scenario passed 5 steps, right? So it's pretty cool. Now, we are not going to be running it from here. This is one way to do it, but doesn't mean we do it that way because we'll actually run it from a terminal. So what I quickly just did is I copy the path of where this project is, so you can just do this copy path, right? And then you'll open your terminal. All right, I'm going to clear this. And then you will say cd and to the path of where the project is. And then you can just do quick ls. So this is called bash scripting, like when you get some chance, like month or 2 months later, just do some Google searching and learn all these quick commands to navigate through projects and stuff like that. But don't worry about it today. So when we get here, we will write this command called mvn clean test. What it does is, first obviously, this is a Maven project, so we have to say mvn. Clean will see if you have any syntax error or anything like that, right? And test will execute the tag that you specified on the test runner. Does that make sense? Right? So we can just do this. Deepak, I guess we have to go over the homework Monday. Yeah. Deepak wanted to go over all the homeworks that you guys did, but I don't think we can cover it today. Sorry? I'm not here next 2 weeks. You're on your own. So you see, we ran this, right? And then we kind of got all over. But we can also see our report now. Because what we already plug in an Allure report, right? So if you do mvn site, what it does is right after this execution, it takes all of the artifacts and now it's trying to create the report for you, right? Based on what happened.
So if we forgot to create a report after testing pass, so how we can get the report?
Well, you can forget and things like that. But like, what you have to do is when we actually do Jenkins, right? We will write this, so you don't do it at all, right? So you're not manually writing these commands. It's going to say, okay, 12 o'clock at night, we're going to run the test. After the test, it will run that command. So even that part is automated, right? So don't worry if you forget. We'll solve that problem. So once the report is generated, unfortunately, you have to open this target file. And I see you go site, you do Allure Maven plugin, and you see it's an index.html. You'll right click, and you'll open in a Chrome browser, and bam, you have your report now. So you go through behavior, it was a login feature, varied invalid, and you go through each one that is kind of passed with all this test data. Okay, so now that's integrated to our project, right? But now, let me try something else actually. We can also override the tags. So let's say we don't have to go into project and update the tags and then run the command. That defeats the purpose, right? So we can also supply the tag from here and it will override what you have on test runner. Make sense? So like test runner, I have login-1, but now I just want to run login scenarios, right? So we can override that from a terminal. So if we do this command, and you see where it says, we gotta add another thing here, I think. Let's see if it allows us to go. Maven clean cucumber.option tags, and we specify the tag name, which was what? At login, right? We'll say at login. So in theory, how many tests should I run now?
All the
6?
because third ones have 3 also.
So 5.
Three, no, five. Sorry.
Okay.
Three,
That's fine. I'm just messing with you. Alright? So let's see if it works. So what it did now is, I think it's overwritten the tags that we had, right? So you don't have to even touch your code to run whatever tag. Well, it didn't work. I'll get the command for you guys. I probably have to send some different requests. But anyhow, we can also overwrite that tag from a test runner, and I mean we have to do that, right? Because otherwise, how can we run it in Jenkins or from a server? But the server is not going to have the project, right? Just going to have the command. It's going to pull down your Git file, Git directory, and then run the test from there. But most importantly, that's what we have to do. So let's run all of the tests once. And let's check it out, what happens then. Oh, sorry. And then we will say so you see how it's kind of, running all of that stuff. Believe me, initially when I was setting up Cucumber, it took a while. There was no videos, nothing, right? You have to kind of just try, error, this, not working. And then I left my job. So the manager was super pissed. Yeah, because how is she going to find somebody right away? It's at least a year. So you do Maven site. Don't worry, we're friends now. I hired her. So you go here, and then you do this, and now all your scenarios are pretty cool, right? So if you had different feature like Messenger, it will pretty much collapse it into messengers, and you can kind of open up. So we don't have any failures yet, but if you had a failure, you have to take a screenshot. Now that's the part I didn't do. You're going to have to do that at some point. So when a failure happens, I want you to attach that screenshot on that report.
How long will it report will stay?
Until you run it again. It will override it each time.
It's not, there's no option to keep it.
You can, but that's on the server, right? We can archive every run. It will keep the history, and you can set it how many days you want to keep it until. So like if you run it 100 times, it will all be there. Right? Just like how you have your text messages or something, right? It can archive until X amount of days that you want it to be. All right. Any questions?
What's the difference between implicit and explicit?
Are you still lost there? Okay. Like I said, implicit wait was supposed to do, I think, what explicit wait does. Okay. So for now, what I would say is don't stress about it, right? Implicit wait was kind of, that was kind of the purpose for it, but it just didn't work for all of the elements. But it still kind of works for some elements. But I'll probably find the right definition for you.
But like implicit wait is for a certain amount of time, then proceeds. Explicit wait.
Like I said, right now just think of there is no implicit wait. Just focus on the WebDriver wait that we have built. I'll give you a definition for it. All right, I don't want to say something that that's incorrect. All right. Let's focus on this stuff now, right? So for rest of the class, let's just take a quick break. And after the break, I'm going to share this. Let me see if I have this on GitHub, right? If I have it on GitHub, I'll just let you guys pull this down. Otherwise, I'm going to share this zip file on Google. And actually, let's do it through zip file. That's to just avoid any problems, right? And
Or we can both.
but before we do this, I think it's better we do one scenario together, right? One test scenario together, and then I'll assign you some work for homework. and then Monday we start on the project. Okay?
Can you share these comments?
Yeah,
Comments
yeah,
or lines?
of course. All right, so let's do. We're not taking the break. We're gonna do one scenario together. Okay.
Overloading. We are overloading.
Informational.
It's a 2-hour, 3-hour meeting. So now you know why people hate hiring new people, because you have to explain all of this. I mean, hopefully not as much. All right, let's add a scenario. What can we do test? Let's add that. Let's add something simple. So we're at facebook.com, right? Um, and I want to find out. I want to enter first name and last name, right? Right after entering in first name and last name, I want to check if this value, if this is enable or disable. Let's assume I wanted this to be disabled. Okay, so we'll fail the test case. Make sense? What the test scenario is? Uh, we enter first name, last name, and check. Guys, let's focus here, right? We'll enter first name, last name, and then I want to check if this. I want to make sure that this is disabled. Make sense? Not clickable. Disable means not clickable. Yes. So that's kind of what I'm looking for. Make sense? Are we all on the same page? So now let's build this in. Why keep showing you this ugly thing? We'll say at. I mean, it's not really login related, but whatever, right? We'll just put it as login 4. And now, would that be scenario or scenario outline?
Outline.
Why is that outline?
No, I need the outline because I need so.
No, you need to.
No. You want to see outline? That doesn't mean I'm going to
You
build.
put a table.
No, why would I need a table, guys? Here.
No, if you use outline, then you have to.
Yeah, but do I need a table here? I just need to enter first name and last name. Deepak is getting pissed over there. It's like, who are these people? All right, and then it's like a scenario. We're gonna focus on scenario. We're not doing table here, okay? You will have a chance to do table over the homework. Verify. Okay, so let's just do something like this. And then we say when so we have it, right? I enter, let's say, Mohammed, and then which field is it on? Right? So it's pretty easy. We'll do a first name, and then we remove all this. That's it. I didn't even have to write any Java code here, right? So we may have to write it for sign up, but that's fine. The next step is also when, right? Now, which annotation should I use? Excellent, right?
We didn't need to find any extras or any ID.
We have it already, right? We have this available for us.
So,
It's not we didn't have to, we did it already, right? You always have to. Don't go away from fundamental understanding of it. How can your script understand without an XPath, right? Your script cannot go find
you
that.
said you don't have to write any Java code for that. But you write
Because it's already written there, right? So that means we have this available for us, right? But don't go into an interview and say, hey, in Cucumber, you don't have to write an XPath. You're gonna get me in trouble, right? So let's say, and now we'll get rid of this. And for homework, I'll just add the scenario here so it's easier for you guys. So we did this, and now finally I want to. Oh, so far 2 steps are kind of like already done for us, right? And now we said then. I'm not clicking anything. I'm just saying after entering those, sign up button should still be disabled, right? I verify. Sign up disable. You might want to add homepage because you might have that sign up button somewhere else, right? But so that way, you're kind of differentiating that as well. Because again, if you have the same step somewhere else, it's going to break. But that sign up button might have a different XPath or different locator than that, sign up button that you have on homepage. So always try to find something unique about making this step unique because this is the only place this can reside, right? You can't have a multiple one of those. All right, so now that we have this, let's run this and see what happens. Stop it. I have it right here. And we are going to do this. We'll run it. So if you can just hit the up key, it remembers all your all commands. So if you do history, like if you forget what you enter, it has everything in the past that you've done, right? It goes up to 532 commands, 531, whatever. All right. So we can do mvn clean test. What's happening there? That's fine. Okay, so it looks like the first name ID locator has been changed or something, right? So if you go into, so that's a good error. I'm glad we ran into this one. So it's complaining that your first name locator this thing has changed, right? I don't know what that is now anymore. So let's look into it. Right here, right? So that's changed. So that happens a lot. So I'm glad that we ran into this. So now you have to make some change in your code. So you have to go back and change this to. Make sense?
I think so.
Yes, I'm sure. Like probably for last name as well. And then we can also find by name, right? Looks like the name is much cleaner, but let's stay to the point. Are we good? Okay, so now let's rerun this. So when something like that doesn't work, don't complain the framework's not working, right? So I just want to make sure.
What happens if you're not there? If it runs automatically, like over the night? What happens?
You check it next morning. So every morning, usually there is a it's called like pager duty or whatever name is. So you come in, you spend like an hour debugging what happened last night.
And then you have to run it again?
Though you run it locally, but eventually you'll run it at night again, right? But if it passes locally, sometimes things may pass locally, but fail on server. Maybe server is a little slower or faster or whatever maybe the case. So you have to debug all of those things, right? But now it's good, right? It passed. But the last step was, you see how undefined? And if it's undefined, it creates this dummy thing for us, right? We can probably use it, right? And how why it creates it, because we put it on these snippets. We're saying Cucumber API, make a camel case method for us if it's not implemented. But it's not gonna do the work for you, right? So when you get here, get to your login SD, um, and then let's start creating this now. I don't like using that thing, so let's just create it out of fresh. So let's say then, and then we'll put a # sign, put a dot sign, right? And we'll just copy this so it's easier. So it's easier to create this first, so it's and then we say public void verify and save. Okay. So now that we have this, but we don't have the button, right? I mean, do we have it? Maybe we have it. So let's go to home page. We don't have it. No, it's a sign up button we're checking, right? So we'll create one private by sign up button equals to by dot ID. Public. It's going to return me if it's enable or disable, right? So I'm saying I'm going to return a boolean, right? Okay, is sign up button enable. Okay. So now you want to return this, right? And we say get, oh, we don't have it, right? So we have to go to base page now and create this enable disable thing. See, we don't have it, right? So we'll go to the bottom of the page. Public, again, is going to return it here. Boolean is, it's not always button, it's element enable. Okay. And it's going to take what? By locator, and then it says return. We need to use web action, right? Pass in your locator dot is enable. It's simple, right? I'm doing the easy ones. But then we go into method, and we say return is element enable, right? And then we pass in our sign up button here, and we should be all right. So only thing we have to find here is now locator for this. Right? Okay. So now that we have this, we just run it. We have everything in place. We just have to go to terminal. Well, not really. You see how this is got enabled now? But there's no body to it, right? So we are going to do assert dot assert false. Okay? Not assert equal. Assert false means it needs to come back as false. Right? Because we are checking if it's enabled or disabled. Selenium will tell us if it's enabled or disabled, and it should come back as false. So now we will say homepage dot get is sign up button enable, right? We can also add a message here. Should be disable. Right? So if we get an error, we get another extra layer of check. This is great. All right, so now we can go here and hit this thing. Okay. Obviously, it's going to fail, right? Because it's enabled, right? So that's fine. It's failing because that's what we expect it to fail, right? So when a fail happens, how does it? No, the report reacts to it. Obviously, you can do vice versa, right? You can say assert true, and then it will come back as make sure that it comes back as true, right? But now that you have this, you see, you also got to see this error message. Sign up button should be disabled. You know, you want to put as many logs as possible, right? So when things kind of go wrong, kind of figure out where things are kind of going wrong. So we have one layer at a test level, you know, where I added that second parameter. Like I didn't have to do this. Like I would still be okay with it without putting this. It would still work. But I wanted to put another layer of the error message when something goes wrong. Once things are going well, nobody cares about logs. But when things are going wrong, logs is the only one that can save you. And also you get to see a, expected needed to be false, but true. Now, if you don't put this error message, it's just going to say expected false, but true. But what am I really verifying? Which methods am I really verifying? And then you want to go through this stack trace. Well, it's happening at login.future39. So if you go into your login.future line number 39, so obviously it's not happening here. There is no code here. So you click on this, and then you get here. I mean, luckily we just have one line here, but sometimes you could have multiple lines. So you want to find out which line is it failing on. So you say, okay, well, login SD Java 73. Are you guys following? So login SD Java 73. So now you say, well, wait a minute, it's failing in this line here. Now you might want to stop there, right? Because then you go into something that you have not written. So you see where it says, now it's saying, well, it's failing on assert false, assert.java62. But that's a foreign code. That's not something. So you want to stop where your code base, like the endpoint of your code base. So now the stack trace is going crazy, right? So now it's saying it is failing here. But these are the stuff that we have not written. It's going to keep putting you into this nested hole, right, until it finds the last initial implementation of that. But we need to stop at some point, and we stop it where we know where our error kind of happens. So learning how to read stack trace is super important, right? Otherwise, it's going to be a big problem for you to debug problems, right? So always start from the bottom and work your way up, but stop where you start to see foreign code. Things that are like assert is not something we implemented, and chances are, again, the error is not coming from assert. Chances are it's something that you messed up, right? So I want to make sure that we're clear on that. All right. So do we run the code for site? Yes, we did. So now, if you go here, and if you hit overview, you just have to refresh it. So if you see failure, you can go to defects and see what's kind of went wrong. So now you don't have a screenshot, and this is something we're going to add. We can add screenshot, we can add video recording, we can do all of those different things, right? It's actually super easy. And then you can also see your stack trace here as well, right? To be honest with you, once you kind of start getting a little bit experience, you're never going to look at that report. This is for people who, it's not technical, right? You can start looking into these error messages and figuring out what your problem is. You don't have to have a visual representation of what you are seeing here. That's pretty much what it's doing. This is more for like management, for release maintenance, and all of that stuff, right? Okay. Now that we have implemented this, let's write another scenario where you can implement it for homework. Maybe we have something. And there are other scenarios here that web related. You can kind of look around and see what happened. Oh, this is a good one. So there is nothing implemented for this. This is a very easy one. You've already done this. I just want you to use the new framework to do it, right? You enter these details. So I am on Messenger page, which I already implemented for you guys right here, right? So you want to make sure you're on a Messenger page. Then you enter this username into username field on Messenger page, not on login page. And I enter this test1234 into password field on Messenger page. I click on sign up button on Messenger page. I verify invalid login. Do whatever right now. I verify invalid login message on sign up page, right? So we got to go back to our roots. So let's say Facebook. What you're doing here is you hitting this link. So you have to create a new new step definition method on homepage, right? And then call that homepage into your Messenger step definition, right? And then I'm entering this dummy stuff, right? And you're hitting a sign up button, and you're verifying something here. It doesn't matter, right? Just verify that you got to this page. All right. So what you need to do is actually you don't have to do anything. You have to only. I've already got you the future file. I've already got you the Messenger page. Not much here, but I've already built this stuff out for you, right? So then you kind of just mess around with it. And then I've already got Messenger login page. So find the locators and get that stuff done. And then if you go into your mobile, no, not mobile, sorry, Messenger SD, you just have to create step definition and find the locators and plug it in. All right. So you get a little bit familiar with how the framework works, and then being able to run your test case. All right. Let's do one more for data driven. What was the test scenario? Can someone send me that? Uh, the list of emails. What's up?
Just one side, why do you use step definition?
Well, how a step definition is the glue code that drives your future file. Right. I know it's getting over 2 hours, 3 hours. I mean, almost closer to that. We have to do this one way, one session actually. Believe me, I don't want to teach for 3 hours. It's tiring.
No, it's
Like this makes me more tired than any of my work because you have to actually explain. Login.5, right? Scenario, outline, verify,
Just want the list.
sorry?
Just want the list.
You can send me the list. I mean, give me the whole thing that I sent. Okay, I got it. Richard. Yeah, she'll get the job first, I guess. You know what? I don't want to write this. Why don't you guys write this thing? So for homework, I want you to convert this, put it on your login.future file, and then write out the whole thing, like scenario outline, and run this.
Pinky has a question.
She can ask it.
Actually, we're doing all of the stuff like Selenium, right? So why we're using Cucumber?
Why is a big question? It's important. I mean, we have to run this somehow, right? You can't run it just Selenium. Selenium doesn't do anything. I mentioned that from day one. You don't see any Selenium stuff here, right? You're becoming a software engineer focusing on tests, right? So it's not kind of like just memorizing stuff and going into interview. That would be wrong for me to give this to you guys, right? You are actually learning how to build a tool that automates manual test cases, right? And for you to build that tool, you need to integrate all of those things into one project, all right?
I have a question. In this, when we were solving this case, there were these emails where the error message was different because
That's fine. Let it fail. Who cares? That's not the concern here. But see, this question will make sense when you're working for a company, right? Like during your meeting, you'll say, hey, when we ran this error messages came all over the place, right? So they may have an answer for you, or it could be a bug, right? But in our case, we don't care much, long as your code is working and doing what it's supposed to do, right? So the ones that's supposed to pass, it will pass. The ones that are failed, but now you can actually build this out, right?
First one is the correct error message. Second one, accept.
What do you mean?
It's take. When you
If it accepts it, again, I don't care if it
passes.
passes or fails. I just want, if it passes, if it fails, that means it's a bug, right? But we're not fixing these bugs. These are Facebook related.
If they put the 8th incorrect email, it's when run. Second one,
They
it's
say in my they are asking for first and last name. Like they
All I'm saying is let it keep failing it. If they're asking for it, it will fail at some point, right? Let the test case continue to fail where it's failing. We don't have to worry about that, right? All I want to see is, do you know how to implement this, right? We don't have to worry about how the web is behaving, okay? So I'm going to write out the homework on Slack. So the first thing is to go through the messenger. Try to do the first one, right? First, because I already have the setup for you. All you have to punch in the locator and build out the step definition for it, right? The second one is you have to write the future file on your login.future and then write out the step definitions, also the locators and whatnot, everything. Make
Are you
sense?
gonna send us the whole framework?
Yes, we're gonna send it right now, and I want to make sure that you guys are able to run it as well.
So this framework is supposed to be built by us when we go outside, right?
Uh, I'm hoping that's not what your job is as the
No,
first
but
job.
initially, like, should not.
Chances are you're going to have something built. It's very rare where any of the students that left here and build a new framework.
So, so if they ask, right,
Building a
they like
framework is
our
hard.
framework, you have to build this all the framework again.
Building a framework is hard.
Then you're gonna do it. That's the best thing that can happen to you. Listen, if the place doesn't have anything, and you get the chance to build this from scratch, that might be the best thing that happened in your life because you get to make all the mistakes, and no one knows in the company what you're doing, right? And because that's why they asked you, right? And right after you learn all of that, get out and make 200K. Okay? Because that's what I did. So, so I want to make sure that if that's what you get, don't be too upset. Like you're just gonna be working 24 hours, but that's okay. But because then you going in your next job saying, hey, I mean, you didn't just build this because you're able to customize other things, learn a few things, and being able to execute something from scratch is always a lot of help. Whereas if you go into a place and everything is built for you, you're not touching the core stuff at all, right? Any questions other than that? It's very rare where someone will trust you to build their framework because it costs a lot of money if they have to rewrite it again.
If there is no like local change during the test running, so will it stop the testing or it will run until the completion?
Yeah, so I think I understand what you're asking. If one of the scenario is failing, would it run the other scenarios? Yes. So it will just keep track of the ones that are failing and keep running the ones that are, So you'll have passing. Of course, otherwise it wouldn't make sense, right? If you have 1,000 scenario and one of them is failing, like the very first one, that means none of them none of the other ones are passing. No, that doesn't make sense. So it will.
Example, like I need to enter username and password and I just click login button. So if login button doesn't work, then I cannot.
Yeah, then all of the test scenario will fail, right? So, and that's okay. If login button is not working, I think you got a lot of bigger problem than your test cases. But that's a good question. Yes, it will pretty much execute.
And when we run